Hi guys, I'm Glennet and I'm making free videos that teach quality engineering step by step so that you can build real skills without paying expensive courses. So in our last video, we've covered the elements of the quality system itself, like the planning, the control, and improvement. But a quality system that only exists in people heads is not auditable. So it is not consistent and it doesn't survive someone leaving the company. So that's what the documentation solves. So, and that's what this video covers. So the roadmap is like first what actually counts as a document in ISO terms and the distinction between a specification and a quality plan. Second, the difference between a quality manual and a quality plan. Third, the four-tier documentation hierarchy, often visualized as the pyramid, covering the policies, the procedures, the work instructions, and the quality records. And we go thereby by tier through what each actually contains. And fourth, the simple but important distinction between a document and a record. Fifth is how tiers relate to each other and through a parent-child relationships, and why the fourth tier model is a guideline, not a mandatory structure. So, and finally, the document control itself, the review and distribution process, the Parsowith for specific requirements for the keeping documentation properly controlled. So let's start with the precise definition because the documentation can sound vague until you pin it down. So ISO 9000 defines a document as a information and the medium of which it is contained. So that's the two things that bundle together. The actual content and whatever it is recorded on, whether that's a paper, a PDF, or database entry. Documented information includes any goals, policies, procedures, and other meaningful data required to be controlled and maintained by the organization, and the medium of which is which it's contained. A common type of documents is a specification, which states the requirements. As discussed in ISO 9000:2015, specifications may be related to processes or to the products. A process specification defines how something should be done, while a product specification defines what the finished thing needs to look like or perform like. So here's a practical, to remember. Regular checks to ensure that documentation is up to date and still pertains to existing practice are important. A documentation that describes a process the organization stopped using 2 years ago is not, useless. So actively misleading to anyone who picks up during auditing or during training. So keeping the documents current is an ongoing discipline, not a one-time filling task. So it's easy to mix up quality plan and quality manual. So let's use the precise ISO 9000:2015 definition for both. A quality plan is the specification of the procedures and associated resources to be applied, like when and by whom to be specific object. So if we can narrow the situational that for this definition, it is about the specific object, a specific application, not the whole organization quality system. So quality plans often reference sections in the quality manual rather than repeating that content. A quality manual, by contrast, is the specification for the quality management system of an organization. That is the master document. So where the quality plan is scoped to a specific object or project, the quality manual describes the entire QMS itself. So the context for this fit into a bigger picture, like plans for achieving customer satisfaction and for ensuring quality of products or services documented in quality manual are sometimes referred to as quality program. The quality program represents the first of two major systems efforts, the documentation and implementation. In other words, writing the quality manual down is only half of the job. Actually implementing what it described is the other half. So we'll spend the rest of this, topic on the documentation half specifically. So there are several ways to structure quality system documentation within a quality manual, but one generic method. So it's shown here as in figure 2.2 in the book. So it organizes into four tiers, sometimes uh, called the documentation hierarchy or pyramid. So it's starting from the top and narrowing down. So these tiers are policies, procedures, work instructions, and quality records. So visually, this is often drawn as the pyramid because there's a typically one overarching policy, a moderate number of procedures beneath it, more work instructions beneath those, and potentially a large volume of quality records at the base. The volume of documents generally grows as you move down the tiers, even as individual document becomes more narrowly scoped. Tier 1 Tier 1 policies are statements of quality policies and objectives, the broadest, most aspirational tier. Tier 2, or the procedures, describe the activities needed to actually implement the system, more concrete than a policy, but still describing what happens at the process level rather than the step-by-step instructions. Tier 3 is the work instructions, or detailed work documents that specific how to. And tier 4 is the quality records that are results of actually implementing the quality system, the evidence that everything above it was actually followed. So we're going to spend the next two slides going deeper into exactly what belongs in each these four tiers, because the distinction between them matter a lot in practice. Confusing a procedure with a work instruction, for instance, is a common documentation mistake. So tier 1 and tier 2 in real depth. So first tier represents the policies, so which may begin with an overall organizational quality policy statement explaining what the company stands for and what its commitments are. So this may be opening statement for the quality manual, indicating management policy and the objectives for quality. So it's the top level why that everything below it exists to support. So there may be additional policy statement or brief documents for each of the requirements of applicable standards. And these policies may be contained within the quality manual itself or exist as a separate standalone documents. So this topic does not mandate one approach over the other. The second documentation tier is procedures. And these provide an overview of how a company actually conducts its business. Procedure uses direct yet simple statements that indicate who is responsible for what and in the course of achieving the stated requirements. In some cases, procedures lie directly inside the quality manual, but more often they're distributed separately, frequently online, so where they can be updated and accessed without needing to reissue the full manual. So the shift in altitude between these two, policy tells you what the organization stands and commits. Procedure tells you in overview form and how the business actually runs and who owns that. So neither one yet tells you the specific step by step or how to that's coming next. So that's in tier 3. The third tier represents the work instructions, which spell out the how to in a clear manner. So this is where the specific, the step-by-step detail actually lives. So in contrast to the overview level procedure, one tier up, an organization may choose to include detailed work instructions or deliberately include proprietary information from them if the information is sensitive. So work instructions are documented in different ways depending on the function at hand. A work instruction for a chemical, let's say for a chemical process, might look completely different in a format from one for a customer service that for call script. And finally, the fourth tier shows the results obtained by implementing the quality system. So these results are documented and maintained to form quality records, and they provide a subjective evidence that the system has been implemented and is effective. So not just described on paper, but generally put into practice. Records must be maintained for a specified time in a protected format and remain retrievable for analysis. A record that can't actually be found again when you need it during the audit or corrective action investigation is not serving its purpose. So here's generally useful. The simple way to keep documents and records straight is worth remembering precisely, like a blank control form or template is a document, but once that form or template is used for record data or results, it becomes a record. The same physical form can be either one, depending entirely on whether it's filled in yet. And just like quality systems, records should have a unique numbers of their own so that they can be tracked and retrieved reliably. It is also important not to over literalize the four-tier model we just walked through. The documentation of a quality management system need not to be partitioned into four separate parts to include these four tiers. This is only a model. The actual structure of quality management system is the best selected based on the nature of the organization and the applicable standards and the requirements it has to meet. So here's a concrete, practical sample of that flexibility. So let me move myself first. In a small organization, the separation between work instruction and procedures may not be necessarily the way it would be for a large organization. A five-person shop does not need the same four-layer separation that a multinational manufacturer does. So collapsing tiers together is entirely legitimate when the organization scale does not, justify the extra structure. However, if the tiers are separated, which is common in larger organization, it is important to provide a cross-reference or links between the tiers to ensure effective documentation. Identifying the parent and child relationships between the tiers of documents is essential to trace connections within the quality system. So these topics own the work example like shown on the screen. This illustrate this precisely. So the parent document for a local design control work instruction may be the global design control procedure, so which itself may be the child document of a global control policy. And that policy may be its separate document or it may simply be contained within the quality manual. So there's a three-link chain, policy to procedure to work instruction, and each one the parent of the level below it. So without maintaining the traceable chain, it becomes very difficult to answer like basic audit questions like which policy does the specific work instructions actually support? For anyone wanting much deeper guidance on the structure and documentation within the quality system, so this chapter points specifically to ISO 10013-2021 as a great resource. So writing the quality manual is not the last step. Controlling it properly, it is the quality manual. Upon the completion of the quality manual, final review is undertaken to determine its competence, accuracy, and clarity. So that review is not a formality. It's the last checkpoint before the document becomes the organization official record of how its quality system works. So top management should endorse the contents of reviewed copy and authorize its release. So note that the endorsement sits specifically with top management, not just the quality department, so which signals genuine organization ownership of the manual's content. So not just a technical sign-off. So once released, the quality manual should be communicated and distributed in total or by section to intended users throughout the organization. Proper distribution and control can be aided, like for example, by a dedicated document control function, a specific role or a team whose job is making sure that the right people have the right, current version of each document and the outdated versions don't keep circulating. So this sets up the next slide directly where we get specific about the proper document control actually requires. Parsowith in 1995, identifies four specific requirements for a proper document control, and this worth knowing precisely because they cover the full life cycle of a document from creation to retirement. One, a process is in the place for generation of documents. This includes the writing of policies and procedures, drawings and specification or other required documentation, approval of contents of these documents, and the distribution of documents once approved. So the single requirement covers the creation, the approval, and the distribution altogether. So a document that's written but never formally approved, or approved but never actually distributed, has not satisfied this requirement. So the number two is that documentation fulfilling the needs of contractual or process is available at all locations in which those functions are performed. If work instruction governs a process that happens at three different plants, all three plants need access to that documentation, not just the site where it was originally written. Number three is a process in a place for the control of revisions to or redistribution of documents using the same system as the original document distribution. So this is an important consistency requirement. If a document changes, the update needs to reach people through the same control channel the original went through. So not the same like ad hoc email or hallway conversation that might miss people. Four is a process is in place for the identification and removal of obsolete documents to ensure against unintended use. So this is arguably the most commonly neglected of the four. Organizations are often good at creating, distributing new documents, but less disciplined about pulling the old files. So superseded versions out of circulation, which leaves the door open for someone to follow an outdated procedure by mistake. So all four of these requirements together are what actually turn a well-written quality manual into a genuinely controlled living document system. So rather than just a document that quietly, out of sync in the reality of time. So let's bring together with five closing points. And first, a document is information plus the medium it's stored on. And this topic is specific that regular checks to keep the documentation current matter just as much as writing it well in the first place. So stale documentation actively misleads people. Second, don't confuse the quality manual with quality plan. The manual is the specification for the entire management system. A plan is scoped to one specific object, describing when and whom procedures and resources will be applied to it. And it often just references the manual rather than repeating it. Third, the fourth tier hierarchy moves from broad to narrow and generally from fewer documents to more. So policy state commitment, procedures describe who does what, work instructions spell out the how to, and the record prove it actually happened. Fourth is the fourth tier model that is flexible guideline, so not really a rigid mandate. So small organizations can legitimately collapse tiers together. But whenever tiers are kept separate, the parent and child relationship between them need to stay traceable. Like exactly like the policy to procedure to work instruction chain we walk through. And the fifth is the real document control as per the Parsowith 4 requirements means covering the full life cycle like generating the approving documents properly, making them available everywhere where they're actually needed, controlling revisions through our consistent system, actively identifying and removing obsolete versions so no one accidentally follows the outdated instruction. That closes the documentation topic. So up next is the how the quality audits and quality cost of system actually verify that everything will be covered for this topic. So I hope you enjoyed this video and give you value. And then I'll see you soon. Bye bye.